Hello and welcome everyone to this week's Garden Hour with MU Extension. We're always excited to have you guys here. We love sharing our knowledge and we love hearing your questions and comments, and you learn from us, but we also learn from you. So remember that fact. I can tell you I don't know that much about orchids and I don't know all that much about a lot of different things, but I do know topics of other things. So we make great teams, all of us across the state, and that includes you as well. So we appreciate you being here. Today, we have some different questions that have come in. We're going to do our best in trying to answer those for you. Donna is also going to be here, and she's going to be dropping information into the chat box. And then we also have Katie, and she's going to be asked questions here. So if you've got a question, by all means, go ahead and send it to Ask Questions Here. Katie will see it, and she'll post that question out to us on the different topics that we are presenting on, if that's what the question is. If it's a question that you're interested in, by all means, drop it in the chat box. If we've got time or if we're knowledgeable enough without trying to look something up, then we'll try to answer that if we have time. Otherwise, we can go ahead and add that to next week's presentation. We do want to let you know that the last weekly garden hour will be on September 16th, I believe it is, or the 18th. I forget which of those dates it is, 2 weeks. So we'll have two more weekly garden hours. And then we're going to go to monthly. And monthly, we will be meeting the third Wednesday of the month. So we'll still do the garden hour. It's just there's not that much out there that people are doing outside, but we know there are things happening inside. And at certain times of the year, we start doing things inside in preparation for going outside. So there's always questions that come in, and we're happy to answer those for you. So what I'd like to do is go ahead and just show you the map of Missouri and all of the field specialists in horticulture across the state. If you can just go ahead and pick out which county you belong to, and then look at the color. And then on the right side, you're going to see the color associated with who your horticulturalist person is, as well as the email address. And feel free to go ahead and reach out to those folks. If you are in a county where it says open, for example, then look to see who is the nearest one to you. So I'm looking at the blue in the southwest corner. That's open. You have Ramon to the north in the white, and you have Kelly to the east in the orange. And either one of those folks are happy to answer those questions for you. So don't not answer or ask a question rather, because you don't see a name. Just go ahead and do that. We're always happy to help you out. We do want to let you know that if you send an email to Kathy Meacham, she's out for just a short period of time and she'll be back in October. So if you don't get an email from her, chances are that's one of the reasons why. But if you've got a question that you would send to Kathy, go ahead and email any one of us that are around that area. What I'd like to do now is go ahead and we're going to start with Zack, and he's going to give us our weather report.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's Missouri Weekly Weather Summary. And I can't believe as of today, it's already September, and we're really starting to think about the fall season. And so officially, the fall season begins in astronomical terms during our fall equinox on September 21st. But here in the weather world, we do define seasons a little bit different and like to keep them in nice 3-month blocks, if you will. And so actually, September 1st is the official start of meteorological fall. And so September, October, and November is usually when we consider fall. So welcome to fall from the weather world here. And now that we've got a few days into September, we can look back at August and really starting on the temperature side, a little on the cool side, but overall temperatures really close to that long-term average. And so here, if we look on the left at some of our major sites around the state, we see Kansas City, Springfield, Columbia, all slightly below average for those temperatures, but nothing too impressive. And St. Louis and Cape Girardeau, less than 1 degree above average. So very close to what we typically expect for temperatures during the month of August. Now, looking on the right here is just our rainfall map for the month. And definitely some winners on the rainfall end, but also some losers as well. So if we look here, Winners would be Northwest Missouri. Anywhere you see the blue is greater than 5 inches of rainfall during the month of August. Also down into South Central Missouri, we also have some of those higher rainfall totals as well. But overall, if we look at Southwest Missouri, East Central, and Southeast Missouri, we start to see those lighter greens. So rainfall totals for the month less than 2 inches. And looking over into the Cape Girardeau area and into Southeast Missouri, a lot of locations that have seen less than an inch and even less than a half inch of rainfall during the month of August. So definitely are some spots around the state that were pretty dry for the month of August. Now let's take a look at our previous 7 days worth of precipitation, which really did help out some of our rainfall totals, especially across the northern few tiers of counties here in Missouri. But our radar estimated precipitation totals here over the past week, anywhere we see this green is greater than an inch of rainfall, and where we see those yellows are greater than 2 inches. And I'll start to the north, and we really saw a good soaking rainfall at the end of last week, again in northern Missouri. But then if we go farther to the south and roughly the southern 2/3 of the state of Missouri, it's very localized rainfall totals. So we see some of those light blues indicating just a few hundredths right next to the greens and yellows, and lots of holes in the maps and scattered greens and yellows. And so this is really just picking up on what we would call the convective or scattered nature of that precipitation. A lot of very localized, slow-moving thunderstorms. And so some locations picked up some needed rainfall, while their neighbors very close might have missed it as well over the past week. And so because of our dry August, and then even currently still seeing some of those localized rainfall totals, if we look at the U.S. Drought Monitor map for Missouri, and this was released last Thursday on August 29th, we see that the area of abnormally dry conditions shown in yellow and those tan areas of moderate drought continue to expand across the state. So still really focused on southwest and western Missouri, but also eastern and southeast Missouri is starting to dry out as well. And so definitely keep track of those drought conditions using the drought monitor and looking for those weekly updates each week. So we've been pretty dry in August and didn't get as much rainfall as we would have hoped over the last week. What about looking ahead? What do our rain chances look like? So here, if we look at this map, this is our forecast precipitation totals for the next 7 days. So this is our rainfall forecast through next Wednesday. Not much rainfall at all for the state of Missouri and really all of the central United States. And so we can see here some parts of the state in white, not expecting any rainfall, but that light green that's across most of the state is just 1/100th to 1/10 of an inch of rainfall. So very light amounts in the forecast. This is just a forecast, so hopefully it's wrong and we can see our rainfall chances increase over the next week. But as of right now, not a lot of rainfall for a lot of the central United States here. What about temperatures? Well, we've had some tastes of fall recently and over the weekend. We're warming up a bit more this week, but I think we'll get more than a taste of fall and really have full-on fall weather by this weekend with the cool down that is expected. So just working through our forecast high temperatures here, we see here on Wednesday on the top left here, forecast highs are pretty seasonable. So lower to mid 80s for much of the state. Warming up a bit more on Thursday, so everybody's going to be a few degrees warmer on Thursday, 88 degrees here in Columbia. Might see a few spots in southwest Missouri touch 90 degrees for a high, but then we look at the next 3 days on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. We see those high temperatures in the 70s where you see those green, but look at Saturday, northeast Missouri, Kirksville, a high of 67. Shelbina, a high of 68 and 71 in Columbia. Very cool fall-like temperatures that will be expected here statewide by the weekend and hanging on into early next week as well. But if our highs are in the upper 60s and lower 70s on Saturday, usually over the summer we don't tend too much attention to those low temperature forecasts, but I did want to show this is the low temperature forecast for Saturday night into Sunday. widespread 40 degrees readings for those lows on Saturday night. Looks like our lowest forecast low temperatures, Kirksville at 44 degrees, and some of those 40s sticking around into Sunday night. A little bit warmer, but still two pretty chilly evenings over the weekend here. And so this is going to be pretty chilly for our second full weekend here of September. And I do want to show, it might be a little early to start thinking about it, but this is some previous work done by the Missouri Climate Center here, which shows our average date of the overnight low temperature falling below 32 degrees Fahrenheit. So when is our first, on average, sub-freezing night across the state of Missouri? What we see is the first half of October, if you're in northern Missouri, right around October 20th for much of central Missouri. And then as we get farther southeast, a little cooler mornings into the Ozarks, but much warmer into southeast Missouri. So on average, we really still have about a month before we're even thinking about really forecasting that first night with sub-freezing temperatures. But just for fun, looking back at some of our long-term records, here's the extreme date, or the first date where we saw that sub-freezing temperature on record. And we can see places like Mexico, Missouri, September 11th, 1917, Columbia Airport, September 18th, 1901. So as far as thinking about the absolute coldest records, maybe not too far away, but on average about a month before we start thinking about frost conditions and some of those sub-freezing temperatures there. And so looking ahead after this cold snap over the weekend, what does it look like next week and into mid-September? If we look at our 8 to 14 day outlooks here, really showing a chance for above average temperatures across Missouri, and then something we might not like for the forecast here on the right. Not a very strong chance, but still leaning towards below average precipitation in that week 2 period. So still not a great signal in the forecast for some of the rainfall that we could use in a lot of spots. This is the Climate Prediction Center's monthly temperature outlook that would be valid for September here. And so this was issued just on August 31st here, and not much here as far as a confident forecast for Missouri. And so you can see here very slight chance or leaning above average temperatures for the forecast, but also on that border for equal chances. And when we say equal chances, it means the forecast equal probability of cooler or warmer conditions. So not much confidence on the temperature, very similar for precipitation. This forecast shows maybe some drier than average conditions to the north, but we're also bordering on that equal chances with a wetter forecast to the south. And so putting all this together, this is another forecast from the Climate Prediction Center that was issued on August 31st. And this is a seasonal drought outlook that kind of takes into account current drought conditions, where we've got drought on the map, but also the temperature and precipitation and how that might impact the drought here. And so this is valid for that September to November meteorological fall period here. But we do see the forecast in brown here is for drought to persist, where we do currently have the moderate drought in place. And then what we don't like to see is the yellow, indicating some further drought development is likely in southwest Missouri. So just something to keep an eye on. Again, there's not a lot of confidence in those fall forecasts right now, but we could certainly use a little bit more rainfall heading into the fall season. And so with that, that's all I've got for today, and hope everyone enjoys the cool down this weekend. Thank you.
We want to say thank you to Zack. He's always been dedicated to providing us with a lot of great information when it comes to the weather. Unfortunately, he couldn't join us live today, but we had his recording, and it's just great to be able to see that forecast. The precipitation piece is a little, as far as I'm concerned, hopefully we will have enough precipitation, and that potential forecast is inaccurate. So we'll see how time flies and how it passes around. So what I'd like to do is go ahead and get us started on some questions that have come in. The first one is ants in the vegetable garden. And when they are a problem due to large number of ants, what are some methods to remove them or to actually get rid of them? And so Katie's going to try to answer that question for us today.
Yes, I'm just going to talk about it. I don't have any slides to show of ants. This is a question that we get fairly often. And the reality is, when you research ants in the vegetable garden, they typically are not an issue because they're not actually eating our vegetable plants or causing problems. However, people do tend to see them on some vegetables, and in some cases, it might be they are feeding on areas where another insect has already caused damage. The other reality is that sometimes they're also what we call farming or taking care of aphids. So aphids are a common insect in the garden, and sometimes ants defend aphids and farm aphids take care of aphids because they want to feed off the honeydew that the aphids are excreting. So when you look, as I said, for information on ants in the garden, there's just not a lot of good options out there. Unless, of course, you live further in the south, and we are thankful that we do not and have fire ant problems in the garden. So thankfully, that is not an issue that we have to deal with. But one of the suggestions that makes sense is to pour boiling water in ant hills. So that is an easy thing to do and can discourage and get rid of some ants in the area. The other thing would be to make sure if you are pouring boiling water on an ant hill, you make sure you don't hit your plants because that'll also take care of plants. Those are just some simple things about ants in the vegetable garden. If you have further questions than that, because questions are kind of vague, and a lot of times we have more questions. So if you'd like some more information or can provide some more information, we'd be happy to continue looking into that further. That's all I have.
Thank you, Katie. Greatly appreciated. And it is true. And, you have ants or you don't have ants. And sometimes those ants can be really massive in the garden. And using that hot boiling water sounds like a plan. I haven't had to do that and probably won't since I'm in a new location right now. I don't have a big vegetable garden at all. There's a community garden in my neighborhood, and I reap the benefits of that. And actually, someone else takes care of it. So that's kind of nice. Well, the next question that we have is a Yoshina flowering cherry. It grows misshapen every summer, along with the lack of growth that's in the middle or the center of the tree. What's wrong with the pruning done to this particular tree every single year? And so I'm going to make an attempt to try to answer this question. And so that question that came in actually had just a picture that came with it, which was very, very helpful for us. And so we're looking at the tree. We do notice that there is another tree over here. With this picture, it's kind of hard to know if that is the second tree or if this part is part of that. Oops, sorry, guys. If this is actually up here, part of this tree. I have a sneaking suspicion it's probably this. So this is what was sent to us. And so I'm glancing at this and I'm thinking that, trees grow and I don't see anything major wrong with that. Both Donna and Katie looked at it and we kind of agreed. A lot of trees will have spaces in the middle. That's just how a tree will probably grow. So I did email and she sent a few more pictures, which was helpful. So the part that I thought I wasn't sure what it belonged to, this looks more of a shrub type on the right side. And what I thought could have been is actually part of the tree itself. And so with this picture, I can see a little bit difference here. I do want to say that after she sent those in, I did email her and she said between the time she sent it in and emailed us the pictures, she went ahead and got a hold of a tree company, a service, and came out and did prune. So these 3 pictures are the tree after that service is actually pruned. And so if we look at tree picture on the left, I don't see this as being a bad shaped tree. Maybe this coming up, I'm not that familiar with how this tree actually is supposed to grow. So maybe she's thinking that this is the way it should naturally grow, and there should be some here and some here, but I'm not as familiar with this type of an ornamental tree. And then the picture that is in the middle, and let me move this out of the way so I can see and you can see, I'm also seeing some in the middle here, and it just could be that this particular tree did have some dead growth as it was younger, and as it matures, and perhaps during the pruning process or not, maybe those branches grew up and they also had issues and died and fell off or were pruned. We don't really know the true history of what's happening with the tree. But by having these 3 additional pictures, it provides an angle that's totally different from what the original picture had been. And so I just want to say that if you send us pictures, we love to have pictures because it helps us to answer and think of other things that could be occurring here. So one of the things I also want to mention to you is that the International Society of Arborists, and it is international, so it's across the world, where individuals can take classes and be trained in pruning and being an arborist of trees in general. So if you're looking for an arborist in your area, there are some that are going to be certified and will be listed on this particular website. And you can actually find an arborist that's near you, which if they're listed here, they've gone through the particular training, they've done the testing, and they're verified appropriately. Now, one caveat I'd like to add about this is that there are some people who are going to be listed, but they may not be with a company that actually will come to your home to look at your tree, provide you some information, and offer you a service if you need to remove the tree or have it pruned. So just be aware of that. They might be, for example, there might be someone at the University of Missouri that's listed as a certified arborist in the Columbia area, for example, but yet that individual is doing things on campus as a certified arborist and is not with a company that can come to your home. So you might just want to take that into consideration. The other thing is that there are plenty of folks out there who will cut down trees or try to prune trees. So asking them questions if they're not a certified arborist, just some different questions. And one thing in particular is to always ask if they have insurance. So if they by chance, cut down a limb and it hits your house, are they covered with insurance to be able to assist in repairing your home as well. So just a few things. And I believe Katie, or Donna rather, has dropped into the chat box how to get to this particular website so that you can do and search on your own. And that's what I have for this. So let me stop sharing. Let's see. Okay, let me figure out. So the next question that we have that we're going to talk about is going to be, again, with Katie. This one's a real common question that we always are interested in knowing about. And it's, what is the most effective way to eradicate, that's an important word there, eradicate, squash beetles on zucchini and pumpkins? And so our pumpkin expert, so to speak, at least in my mind, is Katie.
So, whenever I hear this question or somebody brings up squash bugs, I cringe. Now, the interesting thing is that the question was squash beetles. So, there is actually a squash beetle, which is different than squash bug, and I will show that. But the most common insects that we deal with in pumpkins are squash bugs. So, squash bugs like to hide on the underside of leaves. And here you can see, you notice that discoloration, that dark spot, this yellowing. So if you put that leaf over, you are going to find all the life stages of squash bugs. And you can see those from little to larger. They lay their eggs underneath the leaves. And here's just showing some close-ups of them. And what they do, they pierce and suck, and that's why the leaves turn yellow. Of course, they're very good at hiding underneath the leaves and being all over. I absolutely hate seeing these in the pumpkin patch, and they can do a lot of damage, which most people experience with squash, and also pumpkins typically is where they like to be. So another one, cucumber beetles are also the common insect that we see, and we see lots of those. We have striped and spotted. So they can cause damage where you can see that they've been chewing on this flower here. They can also cause leaf damage. And both of the insects, the cucumber beetle and squash bug, can carry some disease issues. So that's another reason that we want to look at controlling them. But the other thing we have to consider when we're looking at controlling is that our cucumbers, squash, any of our binding crops have separate male and female flowers. So the male flower you can see here goes directly to the stem, and the female flower, you'll see the squash or cucumber or watermelon or whatever it is underneath that female bloom. So we require our pollinators, so bumblebees, honeybees, and actually this is a squash bee. And on this, you see our pollinators here. And also on this flower, you see a cucumber beetle. And this is the squash beetle that I mentioned earlier that is becoming a more common pest that we see doing some leaf damage. So these pollinators are very important to have. You can see the squash bee, bumblebees flying in and doing our pollination for us. So when we are looking to control those pest insects, it's very important to remember that we wouldn't have any crop at all if we didn't have our pollinators. So thinking about that insect control. So we can hand pick them off. If you have a few plants in your garden, honestly, you can see the picture here, duct tape. Works great on those eggs. So those are squash bug eggs, and you can also see some of the hatched nymphs that you can also peel off with duct tape pretty well. Sticky traps can work. Trap crops are an option. So a trap crop is one of their favorites that we would plant. So in the case of squash plugs, blue Hubbard squash is one that they really like. But the key is you have to plant it earlier and surround your crop with them, your desirable crop. So you are controlling them on that trap crop and not spraying on your desirable crop. Another option, particularly when the plants are small, is row covers. We can cover them with row covers basically to block off insects, but it doesn't work for long, and we cannot keep them covered for long because we have to have those pollinators to pollinate. Crop rotation can be helpful, so not planting in the same spot, do a 3-year rotation can help reduce some of those pest populations. And another way is also crop debris after the end of the season if we get rid of it. Squash bugs in particular like to overwinter in debris. As adults, then they come out and breed and lay eggs and start the whole cycle over again. Also, another option in a home garden is put down a board. If you lay down a board, they will hide underneath that board at night. So you can flip over a board and go squashing those bugs. And so that's another option. The question says eradicate. Well, the reality is if you grow squash and pumpkins, you are always going to have problems with these insects. There is no eradication. It is figuring out how to deal with them. One of my favorite resources for insecticide options is this publication, Arkansas Common Cucurbit Problems. The guide sheet is there, and Donna's going to drop it in the chat box. The reason I really like this publication, it not only talks about insects, but it also does weeds and diseases. And the really nice thing is it gives options for commercial growers and it gives options for homeowners. So you can look at both and kind of get all the options out there and see what might work best for your situation. The other reality is that, remember I said we depend on our pollinators in order to do our to pollinate to get our crop. So the reality is we spray insecticides when the flowers are closed to protect our pollinators. So you can see that those squash flowers are closed. You also saw when this was in motion that we're trying to get underneath the leaves and get a good coating because the squash bugs hide underneath the leaves. And squash flowers open first thing in the morning, and usually by late afternoon they are closed. So spraying in the evening with insecticides is ideal to go after those pesky squash bugs, cucumber beetles, all of those in the evening. So we protect the pollinators that are providing the crop for us. That's all I have for you.
Thanks, Katie. So I've got a question for you myself. What about planting some of our crops a little bit later? I know in the spring we're always, especially we want to get our gardens up and going. Some of the warm season crops people want to try to put in earlier and earlier. But I've also understood that if you plant them later than the typical normal time frame, that might help to eliminate the destructiveness or the massive amount of these insects you might have in the garden. Can you really talk about that a little bit?
So in some cases that can help, definitely. When we're looking at pumpkins in particular for fall production, we're actually not planting those till mid-June to we can still get by around the 4th of July and still have a harvest. So we are planting those definitely late in the season, but unfortunately with the insects that go after them, they don't seem to care. It doesn't seem to matter as far as, in particular, squash and cucumber beetle, unfortunately.
Okay, then there was a comment in the chat box that said, I was surprised when I found squash bugs and cucumber beetles in my pole green beans.
So interestingly enough, while they are called cucumber beetles, they are a pest on a lot of different crops. Typically squash bugs were probably just hiding out there. They don't get on or eat beans. They were probably just taking shelter there. But cucumber beetles will eat lots and lots of different crops. I remember my biggest shock was they are a pest in soybeans. And one year our extension council planted a pumpkin patch for a fundraiser at the edge of a soybean field. He sprayed his soybean field and all the cucumbers moved to my pumpkin patch. And that's when I did some more looking and discovered they are a pest. They'll also eat flowers. They are a problem on, I've got some sunflowers, they're eating on those. Dahlias and some of our other pretty cut flowers and different things we like in the flower garden, they'll eat those and some other crops also. So while they're named cucumber beetle, they are not as specific and will go after lots of different crops.
Great information, Donna, and lots of good little tidbits there to add on. Okay, so as we saw with Zack, and he provided us with the most recent drought map for Missouri, and then the projection of continuation of drought in some areas, and it's slowly expanding. And then the 3-month forecast is showing, or the seasonal forecast is showing, that there could be even more drought that could be occurring. And so Donna's going to address the overall concept of looking at planning to plant during your dry weather. Sorry, Donna, I got off the order here. Are you ready for that one?
I'm sorry, which one did you tell me to do?
Sorry about that. Planning to plant during dry weather.
Okay, let me switch gears then. I was all
I'm
here.
sorry.
Okay, that's
That-
okay. Hey, we are flexible. Okay, all right. So, I've had a lot of questions about can I plant? Can I plant this fall? When can I plant? If the rains don't return, how can I deal with that if I still want to plant? Well, you can still plant. You're just going to have to take some extra measures if the fall rains do not return. Now, if they do return, as long as the ground is not frozen, you can plant and plant to your heart's desire. And you can do that you typically all the way up until late November, early December. But once again, our projections in parts of Missouri aren't too kind when it comes to predicting that what rainfall we so desperately need in some of our areas. So some things I want you to consider, and you're going to hear me talk a little later about the same thing. You know, plant and root establishment is key when we are wanting to plant, regardless in the spring, the summer, the fall. That should be our concern, roots and root establishment. Late summer conditions can be so hard on new plantings, and that's the reason why a lot of us think that you should cut planting off around about June 1st, because just that, we undoubtedly we're going to get into a 4-week, a 6-week, a 8-week dry period. And if you're not diligent and stay on top of things and keep watering, it can really hinder these plants. So, we have to really think about our weather conditions. Always remember, like I said, spring and late fall planting are best, but there are things that you can do to plant when it's dry out. And typically September through October can be dry. We just need to make sure that soil is moist before digging or planting. And even if that means coming in and thoroughly watering 2 or 3 days prior, you don't want to water and then plant that same day, because you're just going to be, planting in a mucky mess. You want to water a couple days prior, let the soil settle, let the moisture move in throughout the soil, and that way you are ready to plant. You always want to try to choose preferably the cooler part of the day, especially when we are looking at possible 90-degree weather still in September and maybe even in October, depending on how late our heat snaps occur. You want to dig that new hole prior to digging a desired plant. That is, if you're transplanting. That's the question I get all the time is, hey, is it time? Can I transplant? Well, just remember that if you are transplanting from one spot to another, then you want to dig that hole prior to digging that desired plant. If you're going from container to the ground, once again, dig that hole prior to pulling that plant out of the pot and disturbing that root system much. Any of your holes need to be twice the size of your root ball. And if you are transplanting out of the ground, you really need to try to get as big of a root ball as possible. The more roots you can take, the less shock it's going to be on that plant. And once again, when you're pulling a plant out of a pot, you might want to, gently move around some of those plant roots so they're not going in a circular fashion, but be gentle. You don't want to send that plant into shock. And then once you get it planted, once you put it in the hole and you're backfilling around that root system, you want to water thoroughly after planting. And then, of course, keep an eye on that plant. About a 1 inch a week is what is recommended. If we're not getting that 1 inch a week on irrigation, you need to be out there watering. And we'll talk about watering later, so I'm not going to get into it now. And then once again, mulching the plants once we've cooled down for the year, that will also help with several issues over winter and in the summer. So back to you, Debbie, at this point.
All right. Thank you, Donna. Greatly appreciate it. It's really important because we've had droughts the last 2 years. This year we've been pretty moist in most of the state, but like I said, we're starting to see some more drought, and you can still get a fall garden in with some of these different cool season crops. So you just need to make sure that you work with the weather while you're actually planting and continuing to grow those crops all the way through harvest. And so what I'm going to do next is, Donna, did you want to go ahead and do the next one, or you want me to step in?
Well, while we're on that train of thought on and watering, sure, let's go ahead and tackle this topic too.
Okay, so the next question is watering needs of newly planted trees. And in parentheses, it talks about being planted in the current year that it's happening, but both deciduous and evergreens and in the wintertime.
So on the same thought here, I love this picture. Oh, I love this picture. Don't most of us feel this way? We plant the plant or the tree or the shrub, and we just want to sit there and just hold our hands over it and go, grow, little guy, grow. And we think that maybe we have some magical powers or superpower strength like Superman that will make that plant just shoot up and be a beautiful plant. I just love that idea. Unfortunately, it's not that easy. So another thing that we're hearing is there's a lot of people that have planted this year that are starting to question, in the areas that we are dry, if it doesn't start raining, what do I do? And remember what I said on the first presentation, root development is key. That is what keeps that tree growing or that plant growing, that shrub or the perennial. And that's what is going to make the success of that plant. You want to think the whole root ball, not just under the, up against the bark or right around the stem of the plant. You got to think about that whole root ball development because that's what's key to a healthy plant. In Missouri, we also have to think about our growing environment. What is your soil type? How dry is your soil? We're fixing to move into an era time of the year when we have low humidity, and that low humidity really can suck the moisture out of the soil very quickly. And we also have to think about that weather forecast. That weather forecast wasn't too promising with moisture, unfortunately. And we also have to think about mulching. All these things can impact that root system. And so we have to keep in mind these things as we're moving forward and we start to take care of the plant, whether it's a tree, whether it's a shrub, or whether it's a perennial. Get my slide to go. So, the best ways to water, ultimately, when we need to irrigate, is slowly, regularly, thoroughly, and the goal is 1 to 2 inches per week. And as dry as we've been in some areas of the state of Missouri, you would want to be on the 2-inch side. If you have had plenty of rainfall, then you would be on the 1-inch side. And how will you determine that? Well, you need to feel that soil. Now, we have a video that I'm getting ready to post in chat that talks about using a screwdriver and you push it down into the soil. If that screwdriver, it's a hard drive, you can't push it, it's tough to push down, then you know that it's pretty dry out there. If it slips in easily, there's plenty of moisture in there. And if it's somewhere in between, you can gauge that based on how easy it is to push that screwdriver down into the ground. And so that can help you in determining whether it's time to water. So, if you have a clay soil, think about, how tight that soil can be. You might do a percolation test, dig you a hole, see how fast that water will move down through that soil spectrum. The worst thing that can happen is that you water and then you have a perched water table and your roots are sitting in water for a long period of time. The best case scenario is that you would have a clay to a clay loam where it will percolate or move down through the soil structure in a nice fashion. And so that's when we can water slowly, regularly, and thoroughly and know that we're wetting that root zone. We will get a good wet, but yet we're not over watering. And so you always have to take a look at your environment and your soil and how things are going, and that will also determine the best ways to water. There's always the simple ways by hand or a slow hose trickle. Those are in red because those don't always get us where we need to be. If your water is pooling or it's draining off and flowing down into other areas, it's not doing you any good. And a lot of times what we find is if you're holding that hose over it or you're doing a slow trickle and you let the hose just, lay on the ground, sometimes we have no way of knowing how much how much water gets in the soil and how much penetrates and how much is truly running off. And so I always try to caution people. I like to try to encourage you and caution you, find a better way of watering. That way, that root ball is getting wet. So some of the nice things that you can do, nice ways of watering would be a soaker hose ring. And there are instructions online, and I think on one of the publications I'm going to post that has how to do that. And a soaker hose basically just oozes water out slowly so that it has time to soak in. You can do drip emitters, and if you do drip emitters, that's also on a ring around that tree base, and it slowly drips water out. And as it's dripping out, it will soak into the ground. You can also do some of the water bags. One of the specific ones that I've seen on the market are called gator bags. Once again, it's a drip system. You put it against the bark of the tree and it drips slowly into that root ball. Remember, the key is getting water to go slowly into that root ball so that root ball thoroughly gets moistened instead of watering the grass or other plants around it. You want that tree to get that newly planted tree or shrub to be watered right there. My favorite method, it's cheap and effective, is that you can just get you a bucket and you put little nail holes either on the lower, maybe at the very bottom on one side, maybe put 4 or 5, or you can flip it up on the bottom and put 4 or 5 just in one side of it. And then once you flip that bucket up, you set it where those holes are right there at the base of the tree. You fill your bucket up once and then you watch it slowly trickle out. And as it's trickling out, it is going to soak in. Now I have made my holes too big before and have been sorry. So I would start with small, very small holes. So it just drips, drips, drips. If you want something a little faster at that point, you can make the holes a little bigger. But I caution you, you can make them too big very, very quickly. So if you do the bucket method, I'm sorry, let me talk about this slide real quick. Over to the left is the soaker hose method, where it's a soaker hose ring that is irrigating that root ball. The middle one is a bucket with a hole down at the base, and that's from an internet site, changemaking.com. I have to give them credit because it's an awesome picture. It really displays what we're after. And then on the third picture to the right, that is one of the gator bags that slowly seeps into the ground. So 3 awesome ways to irrigate newly planted trees. Now, how much should you be applying? You should be applying about an inch and a half of 1 to 2 inches of water per week, and that actually equates to about 1 to 1.5 gallons of per inch of stem caliper, and that is for a small tree. Now, watering in winter, as we move into winter, you need to check the plants. We need to go into winter moist. So that's where these come in handy, is we can water now and keep our moisture monitored, and then in the winter we can move in moist. And best way to monitor is make sure that you're feeling that soil, use that screwdriver test, just monitor that soil. The other thing is make sure you mulch. If you're not mulched, I would say mulch by the end of November. I would hesitate mulching now only because, we want those plants to go on to sleep. We want them to go dormant. And so we find that mulching too early can actually keep them aggressively growing, and we don't want that. We want them to slow down. And if you do water after we start to get cold, make sure to always water before the soil freezes, and that's typically any temperatures above 40 degrees. And so that's when to irrigate. And just remember, even in winter, we need to be focusing on anything that has a shallow root, anything that has a fibrous root system. Evergreens definitely, because they do not go to sleep. They do not go dormant. They are still functioning. And so they really do need to be monitored for moisture. We want to focus on any areas that do not have the cover, such as mulch. So anything exposed, will have a tendency to have more soil heaving. And soil heaving is when there's freezing and thawing, and then the soil basically pushes up. And it can really hurt root systems. It can kill plants. So anytime we can get mulch on, mulch will help level out the moisture, help level out the temperature, and help keep that soil heaving from happening. So definitely focus on these areas when it comes to winter watering. Okay, so I could keep going on that topic. It's a very extensive topic, but if you have any questions whatsoever about watering either this fall or even in the winter, please reach out to one of us and we can help you devise a plan and figure out how to best get them watered. Okay, back to you, Debbie.
Thank you. That was provided in great detail. And one of the things that I always talked about on the garden hour when we were in the drought was water those trees and bushes, especially during the winter time, because we were in a drought during the winters the past couple of years. So hopefully we won't be this year, but who knows with the forecast that Zack gave us. So question that just came in, Donna. So when it is below 40 degrees, don't water. Is that correct?
Well, most of the publications say not to water. I have watered, not when it was 32 because the ground's frozen. Anything below 32. 40 is typically the cutoff because our ground does start to get really cold at below 40, and that is the thought process. So if you can water when it's above 40 degrees air temperature, you're better off.
Yeah, and I think that some of those soil biota, those microorganisms in the soil may not be moving as much either, and they're helping the plants to take up nutrients and water during the winter. Even though they're sleeping or dormant, as Donna said, they still do need some of that as well. And the important thing when it comes to the evergreens is those needles are a modified leaf. And so our evergreens don't lose their leaves, the needles, every year. They will go spottingly depending upon the species of the tree, when they might lose some of their needles, but the needles will come back. That's just their normal shedding. However, we do have to remember that those are the leaves on the evergreens, and they're still going to respire. They're still going to be affected by drought. And a lot of the questions we get in after winter and things start really growing is what's going on with my evergreen tree. And one of the first questions I'll always ask is, did you water it? And most of the folks are saying no. So that's one of the main things. And when they're under stress with lack of water, diseases and insects can come in after that. And so they may not notice the disease or insect till it's almost too late. Could be because they came because we weren't watering our trees. So just some things to think about. So I'm going to share.
Hold on a minute, Debbie.
Okay.
I have one question that came in. Should iris leaves be cut down to about 2 inches in the fall?
Yeah, there was a publication that came out just recently, like a press release about irises and going ahead and dividing them out now. Katie, can you go look at that? That was one that Dave had done just recently. If you can find that and just drop that in. And then can you drop the Arkansas publication, Donna, in the chat box again, please?
Sure, I'll do that.
Thanks. So I'm going to go ahead and we're going to talk about bitterness in cucumbers. I was at an event and over weekend with my family. My cousin was there. Her husband does a great, beautiful garden. One of those that if you watched Dave Trinkline a couple of weeks ago, how to keep critters out of the garden. Byron puts up fences all the way around, really tall, and then he covers the top of it with fencing as well. And he has a beautiful garden. So my cousin brought a bunch of cucumbers for us to nibble on for that weekend. And she was like, wow, our cucumbers seem to be really bitter this year. What is the reason for that? And she's looking at me and I was like, that's a really good question. I don't know. I need to investigate that. So I did, and I thought I would share what I found out with the rest of you here. So when it comes to the bitterness, so we have to remember that cucumbers are in the cucurbit family. And the cucurbit family actually has this enzyme called cucurbitacin, however you guys want to pronounce that. And it actually is there on purpose, specifically because it's a way for that particular crop and the cucurbit family to protect itself against insects and wildlife. It has that bitter taste. And so if it's got a bitter taste, perhaps those insects and perhaps that wildlife will not come back to that particular plant. So it's self-defense. I get that. The higher this cucurbitacin is in the plant itself, the higher the bitterness is going to be for that particular fruit of the cucurbit family. Zucchini are also known to be bitter as well. So keep those two crops in mind, the cucumbers and the zucchinis. So we can classify the bitterness in these two crops in particular as mild and severe. So if it's going to have a mild bitterness, what are the reasons for that that can help to build up that particular bitter taste in the crop itself? Because we know that genetically the plant will have it, but how much and to what degree could be on a couple of different reasons. So it could have a low pH of the soil, a lack of fertility with the plant itself, high temperatures, wide temperature swings, and man, have we had wide temperature swings this summer where it get really hot and then it'd be really cool. I don't know about you, but there were multiple times throughout the summer where I turned off the AC and opened up the windows to let the fresh air in. Too little water, especially in the late summer growing season for these crops. Uneven watering, and we know that that's an issue when it comes to our tomatoes because it cracks the tomatoes. So that seesaw effect of being either too wet and then too dry, and then it can be wet and then it can be dry. So paying attention to how we actually water and care for our plants is important. Other things that we have to think about that we can have a little bit control over, as well as the watering and the pH and the fertility, is when do we actually harvest that particular fruit? So here is, in general, the size of some of what these different cucumbers should be when you actually harvest them. So if you have cucumbers that you're growing for sweet pickles, you want them to be about 1.5 inches to 2 inches long, and then go ahead and harvest them. If you have varieties that are put in to be used for dill pickles or pickling, and I love dill pickles, it's 3 to 4 inches long. If you have cucumbers that you're just going to slice up and eat them or put them in some sort of a fresh salad or other type of a salad with some of those dill flavors and things that really are good in the summer and very refreshing on those hot days, the slicing cucumbers are going to be 7 to 9 inches long. If you get the burpless cucumbers, they're 1 to 1.5 inches in diameter and about 10 inches long. So they're going to be a little bit longer. The other reason that they could be bitter is improper storing them once you actually harvest. So we would like to have them at about 50 to 55 degrees at about 90 to 95% humidity. And it's best to keep them for only about 10 to 14 days in that particular environment. You can remove the outer skin. Peeling them may help with some of that bitterness because the cucurbitacin in the actual plant itself, in the fruit, it's in the plant, it's in the leaves, it's in the stems. And then it does migrate from that into the fruit itself. And you'll see it more towards the blossom end as well as towards the end where it's actually attached to the plant is where that bitterness is actually going to have more of an impact in the fruit. So we can also classify this as severe bitterness, and in particular with zucchini, we can find this. And the amount of the bitterness depends upon the severity of both heat and drought. So they actually can have that severity if we're in a drought and if there's high heat. So we may not have had that this summer, but the past 2 summers we did have drought and heat. And maybe those summers you noticed that your zucchini or cucumbers were really bitter. This year they're not, and that could be one reason why. We also need to be concerned because if there's high bitterness in these crops, they can actually, and you eat them anyway, even though they're bitter, that can cause for some folks to have severe stomach cramps and diarrhea for numerous days, even with small amounts. So if there is a bitterness to that, it's probably to your benefit, especially those that might have a compromised immune system in some capacity, just to go ahead and not eat those 2 crops if there's a severe bitterness. So why are some other reasons why bitterness can actually occur? And we need to think about this. So all seeds come from the same seed packet. So you have the seeds planted in the garden. You have one plant where the cucumber or the zucchini are bitter, but the exact one next to it is not. And chances are it's because of other reasons that I've already discussed. It could be just plant genetics itself. So if you have, for example, cross-pollination from the wild plants within the same cucurbit family, and if it's a wild plant, the wild one's probably going to have much higher cucurbitacin than in those that actually have been genetically bred so that they don't have that full amount to cause that bitterness in those 2 crops. So some of the things, and this is what my cousin did, and I said, so we know that it's a buildup at the flower end. We also know it's a buildup at where it attaches to the stem. So cut those areas off, peel it. But my cousin actually did, so she cut it off and she actually rubbed it against the fruit itself. So you can see that in that picture, and it gets kind of foamy and white, and you just kind of rinse that all off. And then supposedly all of that actually goes, and that's what that white foaminess is. However, excuse me. However, she did that with the cucumbers, and it was still really, really bitter. And so she just went ahead and threw that away, which was really sad that she had to throw some of the things away because Byron was so happy with the cucumbers that he had produced for that year. And then let's see, we're over. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is say that we are done for this evening. I showed the map of us earlier, so I won't show that again. I just want to remind everyone that we have 2 more weekly garden hours, and then we're going to go starting in October monthly to the 3rd Wednesday from noon to 1 p.m. Enjoy the nice weather that's out there, and hopefully you'll have some good, still great harvest. I know I'm still harvesting tomatoes, so enjoy.